Gold Rush Update. It was mid-September and cloudy, layered over the Klondike and Tony Beets. The Klondike's supreme authority was in an eagerness to reach his 5,000-ounce goal but the experiment yielded no outcomes. After this frightening thing was found during. Tony's life story is told in the rush for gold. Let's find out that it seemed like an important problem from the beginning. Digging, but Tony continued to have faith in his. The main goal was to cut 80 puppies, where more. Prior to now, around 500 channel gold units were found, as long as Tony could keep the sight of gold in the veins was pleasing. And Tony had only $900, yet he was well paid, and the weather was making his intentions less successful, as rain caused the field to become messy. Despite Tony's habitual perceptions of it. As I was in charge, I couldn't help but think about how it affected their work. He understood how dangerous it was, and now he needed to accept this man's newfound reality. Although drive moves me, this work was far bigger than his Tony had ever been. Designed to operate for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. 12 weeks earlier, this illustrated how he was determined to get through anything that stood in his path. He did, like double the water flow, from the tramp to become part of the environment. Clearly, there was more risk involved, was only to acquire further gold. Tony was responsible for the things that happened, since he was at the beginning of the year. Never stopped being enthusiastic as the ponds settle, were not strong enough, and there were signs of issues there that have already occurred over the radio. The team revealed that some T's had broken. Tony needed to make a challenging. He was compelled to shut down the business, would allow him to hoist the keys and secure them. The lengthy gold rush process included, when they take the required steps, they sweated and worked hard to maintain water from traveling into areas it shouldn't since. There was an urgent need to complete the 80 pup reduction. Once again, the water levels were rising. Tony didn't want them, but he couldn't let the weather decide how much money he intended. He told you fairly clearly that it is not a smart idea to play with your ponds. Tony let his group know that they needed to start working on the project right now. Tony has a trustworthy team member in Nick, was told to keep a tight eye on this. Unneeded part close to the pump is never. The rain stopped, yet the water was still there. Advancing Tony appears sincere in his worry regarding. The T's were not exempt from having to relocate. He thought quickly about how challenging things were, concerned that he was in their favor and with having patience, in my opinion. And watchful are the best things to do in. In this case, nature was taking revenge, and Tony was the focal point of it all. Became apparent that looking for gold wasn't a very good or entertaining game. Little fragments on the patio, it was a battle the elements and the passage of time, and AM's erratic emotions at all times. When I think about these problems, I incessantly pondering whether Tony will prevail, able to fulfill his $5,000 gold goal. Of course, the 80 dog had its own sparkle. Rain and increasing waves, however, were against. His prospects weren't fantastic because of him. Fighting for survival while the sound of equipment remained heard the entire time. Above the location where their digger got stuck. As the pond settled, Tony knew of there would incur daily losses of money if this big equipment did not function as planned. They have to stop ensuring that it was a burden and a significant problem, and there wasn't doubt that digging would be required. Stop until the problem has been fixed, but Mike, your cousin, was able to make it work. Better, he put everything into it when yet his digger wasn't there that morning. Finally turned directly toward the water. This resulted in additional problems. Tony and 2 other diggers departed for a critical rescue because they needed to determine how to. They work really hard to be of assistance, yet it didn't assist. Soldiers were required. Tony submitted his work without hesitation. The enormous 18 TD6 DOZ and the 115 TD1. The next thing to worry about was how to get that refuse. To take the backhoe out of the ditch that Tony made. A perfect strategy ever since he had been digging for some time. The first and foremost, there was a need to. The D6 must pump out the water in order to do this. A massive piece of machinery called a dozer was used. to compel minute particles to enter the well and build a ramp. The plan was to level the below the digger's trap so that the big wrestler succeeded in removing the massive 115-ton, 1850 horsepower rescue truck. After that, Mission Star was sent on a patrol. Tony held up a hand to check if it would be helpful, establishing a route for the D-11 to arrive at, the strengthened ramp acting as a base. This enormous device to stay on course was obvious. Take out the 220 loaders from within the mud. It was clear that the circumstances were extremely terrible and the last of the time was running out. But every choice has an expense. Tony wins. Recognized the risks and held thee on the resolution of the problem. I couldn't, however, consider whether Tony's approach would work when the motor started to growl and when the apparatus started to spin. All of them had. This was the battlefield, as it were. The conflict between nature and people was not that. It's easy to take a digger out of the ground. Managing things was also challenging. That did not yield the desired results and gain skills and knowledge in the demanding world. Tony overcomes the gold mine's loss. Was audible. It is necessary to keep water in the mines. Released so that the digger might be taken out. It certainly acted as a test. To the dark swamp of crisis, which had learned about Tony's mining business, Tony does better. Nonetheless, was not the type of someone to give up on, thinking they were. I intend to get a little closer to feel that things were starting to get better. On the screen were scenes of relief. Employees removing the imprisoned miner from how the D6 dozer's relocation was contracted out. They built the tailings and a simple ramp. In order to help with the rescue, they had to walk a thin line between humans from machines, and Tony Beets was determined to go in. Power over it. Pond became the surroundings. Less of a maze as the plan developed. Proceeding forward, he noticed that things were conducting a suitable investigation into this. The wetlands region also provided tangible evidence of how the conditions for the employees on as the rear assignment, Paradise Hill. As time went on, I couldn't help but wonder whether this was just more of Tony Beets' nonsense. Time frame in addition to the persistent enemy. The current weather in the Klondike has already cleared. A week of labor on Paradise Hill. Even though things were getting harder, Tony kept his attention focused on his 500-ounce goal and kept up hope. Earlier they lost about because of a backhoe problem. After working for 2 hours, Mike's, the cousin, was at blame because he was the driver. The digger unintentionally slid into the mud while Tony shot back, being open, and stated that Mike was stranded as a result of the something else was off target, because to a postponed surgery and a Tony overcomes digger after they get lost. Can his crew make a full recovery? It was apparent to him that some of his problems were caused by ignoring certain products that a small number of people manufactured, the amusing him by telling him he needed to describe everything in either English or Dutch. The goal of rescuing Tony from challenging conditions got better on their own. Tony's expertise in technology as the moves along. All we can do is marvel at how strong Tony is, his team, and Tony wins. Beets have to deal with this awful discovering. Could he get past it, or was it genuinely the last thing they would do for him? To evaluate the goal and determine whether they had reached their goal, Tony Beets was thoughtful of riding a numerical roller coaster. That was a substantial amount, and the amount of they moved more, the more ounces mattered. The mine area was traversed by 9 diggers, declared the number to be 103, and so on to preserve the family's direction. A few buyers observed. For Tony, the number represented hope. Would need more than $300 to complete his 240-250 objective. That's when the count grew tense. 260 as he and the others went through rock after rock. The numbers kept coming, climbing from heights into ever higher peaks. For the duration of their mining endeavor, they were, whether precise or not, the ounces kept coming. In 1987 with 360 plus. Since more than $500,000 was made, it was worthwhile. $850,000, making 4, 6, and 1 their total amount. Oz worked tirelessly for 6 days and attained an amazing result. The harvest of the Zero Pup contributed in specific ways to the accomplishment. Tony knew that at the very least they'd recognized the potential of an 80-year-old dog, been effectively executing it for a while. Tony looked ahead immediately, watching. If only he could call that number up. Therefore, it didn't matter if they had. Sling for the entire day given that gold. That was what mattered, flowing. Gunslingers had no trouble at all with. It was clear that they were prosperous, and Tony could only remark that. If it paid well, that was okay. So scary and challenging to understand. That bad weather would not allow. Tony's plans Tony appears happy with. The outcome was so clear that the characters had established friendships and achieved shared success, which made me feel as though, in order for me to relate to the miners who, our battle with the environment to extract gold at for the time being, at least the endless search for gold has shown to be profitable. Watch the movies I've previously produced to learn more about the ways in which the world is ever changing. Thank you for watching this video.